Okay, so we've got a minute to go, so I think we'll get started with introductions. So welcome to this session on the White Rose Maths Key Stage 3 textbooks. This is in collaboration with Collins. My name's Caroline Hamilton. I'm the head of White Rose Maths and co-author and series editor of these textbooks. So we're really excited for these to be published. I am a trained secondary teacher, but obviously with my role, I've been in this role now for 6 years, nearly 7 years, wow. So I work across phase very much, and I think for any secondary teacher, I'd strongly recommend really getting to know the primary curriculum, and it was nice to hear Bernie talking about that this morning as well. When I was teaching, I had a particular passion for working with students that were switched off really and maybe didn't enjoy maths and didn't really enjoy learning that much. So I'm really passionate about making maths accessible to all, and I think this textbook really helps do that. So my co-host and co-author and series editor is Ian Davies. So I'll just let Ian introduce himself before we get started.
Yeah, I'm Ian Davies. I'm the head of curriculum at White Rose Maths. I've been teaching secondary maths for 30 years. Like Caroline, I'm not actually teaching this year. I still was though last year. I've been head of maths at 4 different schools. I've been an advisor. I'm still a principal examiner at A-level as well. So basically I'm a boring old maths geek, and it's been an excellent opportunity working with White Rose Maths, developing their secondary schemes, and involved in this really exciting textbook project with Caroline as well.
Great, so let's take a look. So first of all, I think you're all familiar now with the chat box, but just in case not, you can use the chat box to ask any questions. And this session, like all sessions today, are being recorded. So contents of this short session. So we're going to take a look at the overview of the series. I'm going to take you through that. And then Ian is going to look inside a chapter and look at all the components of a chapter and the Behind the Questions book, which is our teacher guide. And then what the next steps are, if you like it. So really excitingly, the first book, Student Book 1, is going to be released in March 2021, so just a couple of months away. And Student Book 1 is aimed at Year 7. So as you can see, we've not branded it Year 7, so it'll be really useful to use in other year groups if needed. And there's one book for Year 7. Unlike a lot of other series where there'll be multiple books, this book has been designed to be used with all students, and Ian will be able to show you how you can do that when he looks inside a chapter. Book 2 is going to be released in May, so this is aimed at Year 8, and Book 3, September 2021, aimed at Year 9. And all these books are going to cover the Key Stage 3 national curriculum. So about the books, we've really tried to create a comprehensive learning journey. And as at White Rose Maths, and I'm sure all of you that have joined today, we're really passionate about building this culture of deep understanding for students and helping them become really competent in mathematics. They do fit perfectly alongside the White Rose Maths secondary schemes of learning, but you can use them alongside any other existing materials or curricula. So I know a lot of secondary schools like to form their own schemes of learning, and that's fine. This book will still work alongside those schemes. And it's designed to support a mastery approach to teaching and learning in mathematics. And like I just mentioned, it supports the aims and objectives of the Key Stage 3 national curriculum. So you can be confident that we've covered everything in there from Year 7 to Year 9 as well. Okay, so a little bit about a mastery approach. I'm sure some of you are really familiar, whereas others may not be as familiar with the mastery approach. So this is a very short guide to what's included. So first point that we really want to make is that we feel that it's a journey to mastery, and it takes years and years of purposeful practice. So you won't find in these books any tick list saying, great, you've mastered that, you can move on. And that's just not the way it works. So hopefully the books will just help students on the journey to mastery through mathematics. A key component is a concrete pictorial abstract approach. So if you have used any of the White Rose materials before, you'll know that this comes through hugely through the schemes of learning and our resources. If you're not familiar, in the concrete stage, we may use things like cubes to represent this one in particular is there to represent an algebraic expression, but we might use counters as well, double-sided counters, Dean's blocks, etc. Then the pictorial stage could use a bar model. So here we're representing the same algebraic expression with a bar model, but it doesn't always mean bar models. So you'll notice that throughout the books, we use different pictorial representations as well. And then finally, the abstract stage. So here we can see that we've got cubes and ones, we've got a bar model, and all of these represent the expression 4D plus 3. So to help teachers implement this approach, if you're not already, because secondary schools, I think there's a variety. Some secondary schools are quite well on the way with this sort of approach, whereas others may not be. So within the books, there's some symbols to help students know when it might be appropriate to use some of these approaches. So if you see this little cube symbol in the book next to a question, this is to encourage students to use concrete manipulatives to help them, either help them answer the question or help them understand what is going on with the maths behind the question. We've got a bar model symbol, so obviously that's suggesting to students, why don't you draw a bar model here to help you? We've also got just a simple drawing symbol. So like I said, it's not always about bar models. Any sort of picture or diagram might help them access a question or help them understand the maths that's going on. We've got a think deeply symbol. So I think this one's great because it just helps students just stop and think, right, this question is going to be a little bit difficult for me. So I'm not necessarily going to get the answer immediately. I might have to think a little bit more deeply about it. So that symbol next to a question means they're going to have to think carefully. And then finally, we've got a discuss with a partner symbol. Exactly what it says. We encourage students to discuss their thinking with a partner and think about what connections they can see in a question. And if you are using our material, you'll know that we already use these symbols in our worksheets as well, in our resources. So some students might be familiar with them already. 80 to 90% of primary schools do use our White Rose material, so they are very familiar with this approach coming through from primary school, and our primary resources also use those symbols as well. So if they have been using those, and we know many primary schools are, they're going to see something familiar when they start using these books. We also include conceptual and procedural variation within our questions. You'll see this coming through. And we could talk for hours about this. Obviously, this is going to be just a few minutes, but for an example, in one of our algebra chapters, here we are representing equations in a variety of ways here. We've got a part whole model, a scale and a bar model, and we want students to be able to write and solve the questions from a variety of different representations. This is really going to help their depth of understanding within this block of learning. And then for procedural variation, you'll notice there's some questions like this. So this is taken from the fractions of an amount block. And here you can see we're always using 600, but we're changing the fractions slightly each time. Now, that's a bit useless without any prompts for the students, either from the teacher or, as you can see here in question 2, we've used one of our characters to start to pull out some of the connections in that set of questions. Then the students can talk to each other about other connections that they can see. So with procedural variation, I think it can easily be missed if it's not followed up by that careful questioning. So you'll see that throughout the series, and Ian's going to show you some more examples in his part. Just a tiny bit on sequencing. So we've already said that it follows our secondary schemes of learning, but you could use it in any order, like with many textbooks. And one of the main components of our schemes, if you have used them before, is that we start with algebraic thinking, which is quite unusual. So we'll just delve a little bit deeper into why we've chosen to start with algebraic thinking. So the first 3 blocks of learning are sequences, algebraic notation, and equality and equivalence, just like it is in our schemes of learning. And there's some really big reasons for why we've chosen to do this. So first of all, when our year sevens come into school, this is going to feel a bit more fresh and exciting for them. They've probably done an awful lot of number work at primary school, especially if they've been doing SATs, which we know they maybe are not, well, they're not doing this year. But under usual circumstances, they'd be doing SATs, they will have done a lot of number work. They might have done a tiny bit of algebra, but it's literally a 2-week block in the primary scheme. So they won't have done much at all. So it's something fresh for them to come into secondary school and start with the White Rose Maths progression. And really importantly, it is about algebraic thinking, and it's not about them just learning lots of procedures about algebra. And you'll see that the concrete pictorial abstract approach really comes through in these blocks. It's about them experimenting, finding patterns and understanding how to manipulate algebraic expressions and equations. And what we found it can do is it can really help level the playing field for these students when they come into secondary school. So many of you will be teaching mixed attainment, many of you will be teaching in sets, but either way, it's going to help them come in and have something fresh and new to all start with, rather than just starting with number that they may have struggled with already in primary school. And a massive important point that we can't say enough is we really recommend using calculators in this block. So if they do come with any arithmetic difficulties, that maybe they've not got their times tables, we know that happens with some secondary students, we don't want to hold them back. Give them a calculator, get them used to using it, and then we're really helping level that playing field and raising the confidence with mathematics. As you'll see, we do then go to place value. Yeah, it's really important that students are really secure with place value, with their arithmetic, with number skills, and the next few blocks are all about that. But this algebraic block might just help give them that bit more confidence as they come into secondary school. Just a quick note, you might have noticed these little H symbols as well, and these denote higher steps, and they help with stretching and challenging those high attainers. So yeah, we need to really help build the confidence of lower attainers, but we don't want to forget that we are going to have some students that are fluent in the number facts, that are confident with them, and we need to be able to stretch them as well through the textbooks. So quickly, just inside a block of learning, what you get. So first of all, there'll be a block overview. So this is a visual representation of what students are going to learn in that block. And at a glance, it helps teachers just see which concrete manipulatives or models might be used in this block as well. So it's a nice quick visual. Then there'll be 2 to 7 chapters of content within each block. So it varies in length. For example, probability, there's only 2 chapters, whereas directed number, there's 7. So it depends on the topic. And they all start with our small steps, keywords, an Are You Ready section, and the key models and representations for that chapter. Now, this is the part that Ian's really going to delve a bit deeper into in a moment for you. And then finally, there's a block close. And here it gives a summary of what they should have learned in this block, what they should have become fluent in, how they've developed their reasoning skills, and how they've been problem solving throughout the block as well. And then there's a small quiz there that they can check if they've understood everything in that, well, the key components, not everything, the key components of that block of learning. So these could be used at any stage. You might want to use these when you've done a few more blocks to check they can still remember that information and they've retained it. So that gives you a quick summary of what you get with the Key Stage 3 textbooks. And now I'm going to hand over to Ian to have a look inside a chapter. So he'll share his screen now.
And thank you, Caroline. I will do that. It's your turn to take over the chat. Lots of interesting questions, and I will try to save a little bit of time at the end to answer any more of those. But hopefully you can see my screen now. And we're going to look a little bit more at detail of inside a chapter. So the chapter I've chosen to look at is chapter 3.4. So it's coloured yellow, meaning it's one of the algebra chapters. And we're looking in this one at using the equivalence sign. First thing you'll see is we tie it exactly to our curriculum, so you see which of our small steps that this particular chapter, each chapter, relates to. So we're not going to mention every single small step here. It's the key ones that are delved in this chapter. In this case, it's the chapter that follows on from looking at like and unlike terms. So that step there is mentioned as well. And we also have, in the opening of the chapter, the keywords, the key vocabulary that we'll be expecting students to be using whilst they're learning through the material in the chapter. Again, a lot of people said in the chat earlier how interested they were in what Bernie had said about language, and language is a key component of our White Rose Maths materials, and we've carried that through into the textbook. Next thing, you've got an "Are you ready?" questions at the start of the chapter. So basically it's looking at the prerequisites. Are the students confident with what they need to know to be able to do this chapter? So in this case, we're really looking mainly at what they did in the last chapter. So do they recognize that even though there's different signs there, that those two are like terms, even though those are the same numbers, those are unlike terms? Because they're going to need to do that in using this chapter, which is basically simplifying expressions and using an equivalent sign. Caroline mentioned the teacher guide, and the teacher guide is called Behind the Questions. And for each section in the textbook, we give the reasoning, the rationale behind what we're doing. There's an overall rationale for what it is working in that chapter, but it's saying what we're doing with these particular questions. So there it explains that we're looking at like and unlike terms in those first three questions in Are You Ready? And question 4 looks very simple arithmetic, but the idea is getting ready to look at signs that are matched to terms when they're simplifying expressions a little bit later on. Next thing, we have our models and representations section. So again, key thing that Bernie was talking about earlier that you picked up is the use of models to represent mathematics. And that goes through our schemes, through our bringing resources, and definitely through our textbook as well. So for the student, it just lets them know what models and representations we're going to be using. And for you as the teacher, it's what you might want to use as well in the classroom or for home learning as well. A lot of people mentioned in Bernie's session how much they're using sites like MathSpot to really support this type of thing. And collecting like terms is something that really lends itself easily to that, both visual representation, using concrete materials, or doing it online as well. Again, in the Behind the Questions teacher book, then we do have explanations of the models we're using, when we're going to use them, how we're going to use them, and also models, representations do include the abstract. As Caroline mentioned, it's concrete, pictorial, and abstract. So when we're simplifying like terms here, the importance of using the equivalence symbol rather than the equals symbol, and really understanding the two expressions are always equal in value, a key point of our equality and equivalence block. After that, then we get into some work examples. Sometimes we'll have a little bit of teaching text before that, but basically we show some worked examples. We show on the left what the expected solution might look like, and then on the right we've got call-outs explaining what we've done and why these answers are what they are. You can see this first question is just reviewing that they understand algebraic notation. This is something that they've covered already in block 2 algebra. Those of you who are familiar with our schemes will know that. So this algebraic notation is a prerequisite to the simplifying, and it's just checking they're happy with those understandings. And again, second example there, we're now showing how you can use the models and representations in order to get the answers. So showing how the models and reps tie into the work that we're doing in this part. Just looking at part C of that same example there, again, a very common error here would be to say 2x cubed 2x squared plus 3x squared is equal to or equivalent to 5x to the 4. So we're highlighting that misconception and showing how you can use the box to see you've still got 5 lots of x squared. And algebra tiles is something we use a lot in our schemes. And again, we brought that through into the textbook so that it ties in closely together. Okay, really highlighting those misconceptions, both within the textbook, but again, also within the teacher guide, the Behind the Questions book. So we have a section in every chapter that says the sort of things you might need to look out for, the sort of things you can expect students to either find difficult or make mistakes with. Many of you are experienced teachers and will probably know a lot of these, but this is really, really helpful for, say, non-specialist teachers of mathematics or people who are early in their careers, just to highlight for them things they can look out for in teaching. We also highlight in that Behind the Questions guide then some interleaving opportunities. You also talked earlier about Bernie's great stuff about making connections, and our curriculum is really designed on making connections between different areas. So we point out in the teacher guide where we'll be coming back to these things and what other things you will already need to know in order to succeed in the chapter that we're currently working with. We then get onto the practice section, and as you can see, just lots of things for students to have a go at. First question is again about just reviewing that notation that they've done before, and then you've got onto simplifying when you've only got one set of terms here. Okay, so they're all from the same letter in this first section, or the same combination of variables. And as you can see, as you go down to question 3, there's a little bit more thinking, because we're looking at which of these will and which of these won't be equivalent to 4m. Again, the Behind the Questions teacher guide will give you the comments on those, and make suggestions. Like for that question 3, you can highlight the misconceptions and you can check whether your answers are correct by using substitution. Again, it's key for students to understand that as they're working through this, even though we're using objects to represent and letters to represent, what we're representing is numbers, and making that link back to numbers is really useful for checking there. Okay, as the exercises progress, it gets a little bit harder and a little bit more, more thinking, reasoning and problem solving, all here within the main exercise, because we want every student to access reasoning and problem solving. It's not just something for, the top sets. At the end of each particular section, then, we've got some even more challenging questions. And these are often a little bit more open-ended and linked perhaps to another section or another area of mathematics. Quite often we use our characters, we've got these talking heads having discussions, to prompt to that student thinking, So often this question is that explain why so-and-so is right, explain why so-and-so is wrong. Again, we've got open-ended questions here, so real chances for students to be a little bit more creative and challenge their thinking on there. Again, each of these is explained within the teacher's guide to the Behind the Questions, what it is we're trying to get out of these particular questions. Then we'll get on to the next part of the chapter. So there's another small step that we're going to cover here when you've got more than one set of like terms. So again, we've got some more examples, and again, we're showing how you can use the models and representations to support that understanding, which again was what Bernie was talking about. So you can see collecting like terms links to collecting the objects, and you can make it connect to linking numbers as well in there. So this is the development within the chapter. We're now going on to harder material than in the first part. And then, because we're doing a new thing, we've got another practice section. Okay, within this practice section, you can see you could use manipulatives here to help support this. So we've got that symbol that Caroline was talking about earlier. You can see again the variation that we've got there. We've got a lot of very similar looking, but very, very different questions. So what's the key things? What have we varied? What have we kept the same? What possible things could go wrong here? Really to make the students think. You can see in the second question there, we've got a link to perimeter. It's not something that we're focusing on in this chapter, but they'll have done perimeter in Key Stage 2. So again, that's something we like to keep these skills sharp in there as well. And you can see we've got a think question there about finding the difference between the lengths rather than adding the lengths. And how would you write that down? 3p plus 2 subtract p plus q in there. And same as the other exercise, it then develops in difficulty, and we'll look at, again, potential errors that you'd have if you've got x's and x squareds, and what's like and what's unlike, and are statements true or false. At the end of practice section B, there's another what do you think section, again designed to, give students a little bit more to think about. And, they're not closed questions either. They're things that, you can use as a teacher to develop then the students' thinking. So find 10 different expressions that simplify to 3A, add 4B, and you might look at how many terms can you get in? Can you get one with 6 terms? Can you get one with 7 terms? You might want to push further and look at ones with negative answers. If you look at that question 1, what's the most complicated way you can get the answer? 3A, add 4B, etc. After then the main parts of the book, we've gone a consolidate section, which, as it suggests, is further practice. So if you're using this in a mixed attainment class, it might be for some students that if they struggled a little bit with the earlier questions in 3.4a and 3.4b, you might want them to do a little bit of this consolidation before they go on to something else. It might be this is something you use for homework, or it might be something that you come back to 6 months later. There's something to refresh students' memories to look at that. But the idea is that there's plenty more practice and it covers the same ideas in the chapters. Again, using the talking heads and working in the same sort of order that the 2 earlier chapters did. Then the last bits of questions for the students, we've got the stretch questions. So again, for some students, if they're working through things quickly, you might want them to get onto this stretch and challenge a little bit earlier. As with all the other questions, we've got behind the questions, teacher's guide, giving notes of what we're looking for here. And you can see in that question 2, for example, that's a very big open-ended question. We don't look at multiplying brackets in year 7, but we've got the idea of something that you could explore with students who are working at that higher level at the moment. The very final bit then, we also have a little bit of metacognition here. So, a little bit of chance for students to reflect. So these last couple of questions, you may want them to record this in a journal, you may want them to talk about it, or you may want to lead discussions, give STEM sentences, but things to make students reflect on their learning to help them remember what they've done. And again, in the behind the questions, we've got some ideas and suggestions there as what you might want to do, and encouraging them to use the word coefficient in their answers. Again, that big emphasis on mathematical language in there. So that's what the chapter looks like. Key points, it supports the mastery approach that Caroline talked about at the beginning. There's only one textbook for each year group, but we've got that differentiated content with the what do you think questions and the stretch and the consolidate, so you can make that work as you wish with any class. It's linked to our schemes directly, it follows the order of our schemes, but basically the 3 books will cover the Key Stage 3 National Curriculum, so you could work it with any other system that you wanted to. The other thing I think, which is quite a big difference from a lot of other textbooks, it doesn't assume you know everything. So in book 3, which we're just finishing off now, there are some solving equations in book 3, but it also refers back to and has practice questions of what was in book 1 and book 2. Just assuming that they've remembered everything perfectly, because some students will need to do that revision. So the next steps, the books are coming out soon. If you haven't done already, sign up for a free evaluation pack on the Collins website. And there's some sample chapters in their website as well. And in your delegate goodie bag, there's another 2 full chapters and an example of one of the block openers and block closes. So I think we've got a couple of minutes there. So if anybody has got any questions, or Caroline, any major things that have come through the chat box while I've been talking, please.
A lot asking about ebooks, but I've directed to the link, to be honest. I'm not 100% sure on that question, but to be honest, it's overwhelmingly positive. Thank you, everyone. I'm feeling really happy. I think a lot of people are excited about this. Someone's just asked, is it the same as what Bernie Westcott was talking about with Singapore Maths? It's not, just totally different series, but we're very in line with Bernie's thinking, so it's all very much in line.
Yeah. I'll comment on that one as well. It is the same principles, basically.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same principles, because Singapore is a mastery approach. It's just a slightly different mastery approach. It doesn't tie exactly to their curriculum, it ties to our curriculum as well. I noticed a question earlier about H and whether that was higher tier GCSE. It is in our Key Stage 4, but not in our Key Stage 3. It's just about something that's more challenging for students, but it will be covered later on. So if it's a higher step in book 1, it's an ordinary step in book 2. So students eventually do cover all of it.
Someone's just said we need them for key stage 4 too. Can we get busy? So we're a little bit tired, but yeah, we'll try. We'll get on that.
Let's get my life back for a few weeks before we start writing key stage 4. But yeah, it's a possibility. You'd need to buy it for key stage 3, and then I'm sure if these books are a success, and I'm sure they will be, then the publishers will be interested in that as well.
I'm just going to get the link to the evaluation pack as well, because a few people are asking. So
yeah, it's in your goodie bag. So if you go to your email and click on your goodie bag, you get it from there. The cost, the full price, I think, for a textbook is £15.99. But obviously, there's loads always of discounts to be done there. If you go to the Collins evaluation page, there's a 20% discount there, and also there's there's discounts for buying larger quantities, etc. You can talk to your Collins rep about that, but it's priced as a typical textbook in the market. I think the first book is about 694 pages, so it is quite good value at that price, and as I say, you can probably get a lot of discounts on there as well. If you have got questions afterwards, more things, please do continue to tweet us during the day. We'll be monitoring the tweet. We won't be able to answer every question straight away because we've got hundreds and hundreds of people here today. But we'll keep an eye on those questions, and we will respond to those. I'm aware that it is 11:15, which is time we are to finish, and to give you 5 minutes to get to your next section. Thank you very much for listening to us. I hope you found it useful. I hope we've answered your questions. And yeah, so thank you from me, and thank you from Caroline.
Yeah, thank you.